It's no longer the NFC least. Can't say that. I mean, we had the Eagles win the Super Bowl. They were in the NFC Championship game against the Commanders. And the NFC East has just a meat grinder this year. The hardest strength of schedule belonging to the Giants. And all four teams are in the top 8 toughest schedules for next season when you go on last season's winning percentage. Chris Hassel, Amanda Guerra, Kyle Long, and Lige Douzable will have Mackenzie Brooks join us with a sports line angle on the NFC East schedule in just a second. Let's start with the Eagles, who you saw the list. They don't have the toughest schedule in terms of winning percentage, but first team in NFL history, Lige, that plays 10 playoff teams from the year before.
And I believe 7 on the road. But this is a team that's built to play the upper echelons of the NFL. Now, the biggest question, obviously, they lose their offensive coordinator. He goes to the Saints to become the head coach. Kevin Patula now is the offensive coordinator. And we saw kind of a lull 2 years ago when they lost both coordinators. They really struggled that 23 season, but they still played well enough, Kyle, to get into the playoffs. Yes, people keep talking about all the defensive players they lost, but the one thing Howie Roseman does a really good job of is getting first and second round picks a redshirt year. Guys are able to step into their own in their second year. We saw that with Nakobe Dean. We saw that with Jordan Davis. A guy like Jalix Hunt was real big in the Super Bowl. Didn't play majority of his rookie year, but he stepped up big when they needed him to. So you'll see a lot of these young players step up and become starters because you see it right there how many players they lost. Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Milton Williams. But they have guys that have had redshirt years that have played in spot start duty to come in and fill the void. The offense only loses one player, Kyle. Mekhi Becton at guard, and we know that they have the best offensive line coach in the league, so they'll be fine there. So even though, to Hass's point, 10 teams from last year that made the playoff are on the Eagles schedule, they'll be fine because they're built for this.
Yeah, they're built for it, and they're dominant at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And really, that's the recipe that ends up making people like Patrick Mahomes look human. Get after him as a quarterback, and then obviously protect your own. And for Jalen Hurts in particular, I think he will take the biggest leap in this coming season because he got to the top of the mountain. He was the last one standing. And I've never been there, but I would imagine it breeds a certain kind of confidence. And Jalen Hurts, we're going to see that the entirety of the season from him. I can't wait to watch big number one get after it all year.
They don't have back-to-back home games at all, but you guys still have them winning the most games in this division. Lige, what's your record?
Yeah, I have them going 12-5 just because championship pedigree. They've been put to the test. We saw it last year. Going into the bye, they were 2-2, Kyle. A lot of people were asking to fire their head coach who had just went to the Super Bowl 2 years prior to that.
I was yelling at him.
That was insane to me. Like, how can you ask to fire Nick Sirianni when he just took you to the Super Bowl 2 years ago? So this is a team that has a lot of different personalities, and you know this, Kyle. You've been in locker rooms. It's tough for a head coach to get all those personalities on one page for a common goal, and they were able to do that and get to a Super Bowl. So when I say this team is well-versed and well-tested, they'll be ready for the schedule.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked about Nick Sirianni because there's only a handful of coaches that have had the success that Nick Sirianni's had. You know, you got to press pause to take a look at those numbers and the facts that are in front of us. But Nick Sirianni's great, and I think the thing that guys respect the most about Nick Sirianni, he is himself. Yeah. He is not fake. There's not an ounce of fake in that dude. And yeah, it pisses some people off like myself. I get ticked off by Nick Sirianni sometimes, but he goes out there and he wins. His team plays hard for him, and that's why I got them going not 12-5, 13-4.
13 piece extra crispy.
Wow.
I mean, I know we got holes on that defense, but like you said, Howie Roseman's got them filled in. He's got people ready.
Fine.
So when they face the Commanders twice, we're going to talk about the Commanders. Are any of those a W for the Commanders?
We'll have to see.
Okay, all right. So the Commanders out of the NFC East do have the easiest schedule out of these 4 teams, if you consider it that they are ranked 8th overall. And I will say the fans, at least, they're excited. I was reading an article. They said no more 1 p.m. games. They get to be on Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, but they got to face teams like the Eagles twice.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And they have the benefit of having a young superstar in Jaden Daniels. And the one thing that the Commanders are up against this year are expectations. And when you have gone that far with a rookie quarterback, with a team that was punching up, Dan Quinn instilling a new culture with guys that we're getting to know as the season goes along on the defensive side of the ball, people say, well, we have to get better than that next year, right? This is the next iteration. So I would say pump the brakes and understand that last year was a magic ride. And if you're anywhere near that as a Commander fan this year, you should be thrilled because the next decade decade plus with Jaden Daniels is going to be awesome.
As long as they got JD5, they have a fighting chance. You saw nobody was more clutch in-game situations than Jaden Daniels. And you talked about it, Kyle. Like, what he did was out of this world as a rookie quarterback. I liken it to the Houston Texans the year before and the Packers, right? High expectations. What are you going to do now that everybody knows you're coming? That is going to be the question mark for the Commanders as they try to dethrone the Philadelphia Eagles. You see how many players they've added. Debo Samuel via trade, Laramie Tunsil via trade. They added Javon Kinlaw, Dedrick Wise. So they've gotten significantly better, and I love what they really did in the draft, getting Josh Connerly, who's going to be able to start either at right tackle, at guard, and Trey Amos, who went in the second round but was really a first-round corner. He's going to allow them to slide Mikey Standerstill back at slot position, which is best position. So I think this is a team that's going to push the Eagles. I don't have them dethroning them this year, though.
11-6 for Lige and for Kyle. You mentioned the Texans and C.J. Stroud. And I got to think that that's the worry. Like, how do we avoid that year two? Look, the Texans were still good.
Stroud was still good.
That's what I'm going next.
Okay.
But when you expect to be even better, how do they avoid doing that?
I think you have to stay the course and keep your head down and work, right? C.J. Stroud even came out and admitted this. He felt like he was maybe doing a little bit too much in the offseason. We haven't really seen Jaden Daniels out there in the news. Now, I believe he did a little bit of F1, but I mean, you're an NFL player. You got to blow some steam off, right? You got to have some fun. But just to look in this kid's eye, and you see it right there when you talk about all-time rookie ranks. First in wins, first in total touchdowns, first in total yards. When you talk about the regular season and postseason, he's just built different. And I hear you, Has. We were saying the same thing about C.J. Stroud. But I think the biggest issue with the Texans was they struggled with the offensive line. And it doesn't matter if you're a young guy or a veteran guy. If you don't have help in the trenches protecting you, you're going to get skittish. That's why I love that they took Josh Connerly in the first round to really solidify that offensive line. Go get Laramie Tunsil. That way he knows his backside is protected.
Took it from C.J. Stroud.
Literally. So you make C.J. Stroud weaker and you make Jaden Daniels stronger.
Josh Connerly, a guy who can step in multiple positions, tough player, played a lot of football. Obviously, Laramie Tunsil is going to be protecting the blind side. And I often talk about the right side of the offensive line being the one that the quarterback is more conscious of. Duh, a right-handed quarterback is looking at the right guard and the right tackle.
Correct.
But if the left tackle is getting beat, that's where turnovers happen. That's where sacks happen. That's when quarterbacks can get hurt. And for a guy like Jaden Daniels, you need him on the field. Laramie Tunsil's great. That's why the Texans struggled. They weren't on the same page with coordinator and quarterback and protection plan.
For sure.
They have that as a priority in Washington. Jaden Daniels is going to be dangerous.
We got to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, and this was going to be Chris's topic, and I actually asked to take it from him.
She took it from him.
Because I was walking into work, and I got hot. I saw another network talking about can the Cowboys
You were
win
watching
the
another
NFC?
network?
I saw it on we have lots of TV.
Straight to
Hold on, so I know you're an Eagles fan, but you're from the Texans.
I am from Dallas.
Are you a Dallas fan too, or no? Like, how does that work?
I get very annoyed with the team, and I get very annoyed with Jerry Jones. Because, and I feel like Kyle's going to back me up, because not really much has changed with this team. They have a hard schedule, yes. We give them all the holidays. They get Christmas. they get Thanksgiving.
They're America's team.
They
rate
all the primetime games.
I get it's America's team, but Kyle, by the time we get to that point, are we even going to be excited about watching this team?
Well, I'm glad for Dallas Cowboys fans' sake that they put them in primetime week 1, because everybody and their mom is going to be watching the Eagles and the Cowboys. But they don't want to waste the potential of having that Cowboys fan base be out to sea in week 10 when they're, 2 and 8. So
so here's the thing: you guys are on very opposite sides.
Get the fandom of the Cowboys while it's hot. Get them early and often in prime time. I know you and I have different records for this team. I think the Dallas Cowboys have a very young base in the offensive line. The core of that offensive line is young. I love what they did in the draft there at the guard position. But it's going to take another year for that group to gel. It's going to take another year for Coach Schottenheimer to be able to command the respect. And to be quite honest, you're bringing George Pickens into the fold. What's going to happen with George Pickens? It wasn't tremendous at all times in Pittsburgh. Who's to say that a big-time city like Dallas lends itself to having George Pickens show up on time in rhythm with his teammates every day?
Yeah, Kyle, I do have this as the third team in the NFC East. And to Chris's point, you can't say the NFC least anymore. This is one of the most competitive divisions in football. I actually got them going 9-8. I think they're going to be a lot better than people expect them to be. Yes, they have a gauntlet of a schedule, but let's not forget, just 2 years ago, Dakota Prescott, Dak Prescott was number 2 in the MVP race. Like, people forget that because he got hurt last year. Just 2 years ago, he was number 2 in the MVP race. And a lot of people thought he should have won it over Lamar Jackson. So he's motivated. I've seen film of him. He looks a lot slender, looks like he's more in shape. George Pickens, contract year. You know how it is when you go somewhere in your contract year. You're highly motivated. You want to get paid. A lot of people view him as a high-end 2, maybe even around 15 to 17 top receiver in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb has proven he's a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Now, Jerry Jones does have some business to do with Michael Parsons. That needs to be done because he's the best player on that team, and you don't want him going into the season without a contract being locked in. But I believe the Cowboys will be better. The biggest question will be that young offensive line. Can they gel? Tyler Booker is going to bring some nastiness to the offensive line. You got Tyler Guyton there as well. You got T. Smith. Like, they have the pieces. They just have to develop and gel and win through the trenches. Because I thought they had a home run draft. I believe this team is going to be a lot better than people think.
A lot beher than Kyle thinks. He has them at 5-12.
Wow.
I think they have the potential.
No, that was your boy DK.
I think they have the young talent.
I knew someone.
They have young talent on the roster that tells me they could be a team that could be 12-5 in the next year, though. 5-12. I'm being tough on Cowboys fans. I'd love to see them in my mentions. I look forward to seeing them.
They'll be there.
In 12
5-12. You have the Giants, Kyle, having a significantly better season than the Cowboys.
In the NFL.
Yeah, with the hardest schedule. Yeah. How's that?
They got a ton of quarterbacks out there in New York.
Yeah, they got 4 quarterbacks.
If you got 3 quarterbacks, you got 9.
The Giants will have one of the most dominant defensive fronts in football.
They will.
And they made great moves on the back end this offseason, bringing in some real big-time playmakers. And they've got absolute monsters on the interior of that defensive line. I can't wait to watch the Eagles and the Giants play because that's football hog heaven right there. Outside of that, I will say that I do think that the Giants will have a better season than the Cowboys. I trust in that staff more than I know about the Cowboys' current staff.
Who the hell is going to play quarterback?
That's where I'm starting this conversation.
Dart, bro.
You think it's going to be him?
I love Jackson Dart. I've loved Jackson Dart since the first time I saw him swing a golf club. I said, that's a guy that's got records. Okay, that's a guy with club head speed. He runs the football. He wants to hit people like Josh Allen in space. The coach's got to say, whoa, rather than sick him. That's what you want with a rookie. I love that about Jackson Dart, and I think he's cut out for that big city.
I talked to their GM at the league owners meeting, and the plan, not the league owners meeting, literally 2 days after the draft, and he said the plan is not to play Jackson Dart right away. Now, they had the same plan when he was in Buffalo with Josh Allen. Then Josh Allen comes in the game where they're getting blown out, plays well, and the rest is history. So I don't believe Jackson Dart will start this season. I hear what you're saying. They do have one of the best defensive lines in football. But they had that last year as well, Kyle. And it didn't matter because the offense was abysmal. I have issues with their offensive line. Like, is anybody going to stay healthy first and foremost? Can they gel? Can they protect whoever's playing quarterback, whether it's Russell Wilson, whether it's Jameis Winston, whether it's Jackson Dart, whether it's Tommy Cutlets? We don't know who's going to start at quarterback. But there's real issues in that offensive line. Again, they do have one of the best defensive lines that can get after you. Dexter Lawrence is probably the best D tackle in football. But until you can have an offense that can take some pressure off the defense, it's going to be a long day for New York. I have them going 4-13.
With a 7-game losing streak from week 6
Those first 12 weeks are a gauntlet.
Yep.
Well,
The first 12.
toughest schedule
Like, that's
in the
like
league.
Which
small
may lead to a
portion.
Jackson Dart-led team. Take you to the promised land.
You're
bud.
right. You're right.
He's got a big old
lot of
diamond
growing
neck.
pains.
There's a lot of stuff about Jackson Dart that I usually would be like, yeah, I don't like that about a quarterback, but it's 2025.
Yeah.
Time to change it. I'm like, get that young guy in there.
I love his swag.
Tell him to run the football, get some first
Been
downs.
hanging out with Pete Briscoe a lot.
Dude, does he like him like I do?
I don't know.
No,
but
he was mad they traded in the first round to get him.
Okay, well, I got to call
He wants to see those rookies play.
Pete Prisco nowhere to be found, but we do have Mackenzie Brooks standing by from Sportsline to dive into the numbers a little bit more, Kens.
Yeah, I'm pretty in line with a lot of you. I've been biting my tongue, though, on some few things over here while I waited for you guys to finish up. But to no surprise, we do like the Eagles the best in this division. We have them around 11 wins here, just like odds makers do. Our win totals are pretty in line with odds makers across the board. Why we have so much value on the Eagles to win the division at 68% has a lot less to do with them and a lot to do with the Commanders. You guys were talking about it, right? We saw that with C.J. Stroud and Houston. It was never C.J. Stroud getting worse after his rookie year. The schedule got harder. He had a great, easy schedule his rookie year. We saw the same thing with Washington. Their average opponent was a 7-win team. Now their average opponent is a playoff team, closer to a 10-win team. So yes, you're going to have a 70% pass completion when you're playing defenses that allow 70%, right? So the situation is, this is going to be a tough schedule. I think the world of Jaden Daniels I have for years. But again, when your schedule gets tougher, it's just harder to win. So that's why we have them at that 24%. As far as the Giants down here at around 5 wins, look, you know, you get Abdul Carter, you obviously help your defense. But the defense, like you guys mentioned, was never really the problem. So you're filling a shallow hole here with a lot of other holes going on. As far as the Cowboys, we have them around 8 wins. I'd call that their floor right now because you could see George Pickens, you know, really start to play at a higher ceiling, potentially. And you also potentially could have a better running back room by the time the season starts if you see some trades or other things going on. So I call this the Cowboys floor with some potential of thunder and lightning running back room. I'm not here to technically say that, but it's definitely going to be the Eagles for us. Odds makers have them around -145 to win the division. That implies around a 59% chance. We give them a 68% chance. So technically right now that -145 is pretty good value.
All right, good value on the Eagles. And if you're Kyle Long, it's great value on the Cowboys under.
Come on.
He has winning just 5 games this season. Sportsline numbers don't change your mind at all.
Oil money, okay?
Kyle Lige, thanks. As we look at the NFC East schedules, we're going to go division by division for the next few days here on HQ. Many more picks from our Sportsline experts on the Early Edge podcast. Scan that QR code. It'll take you there. You can listen to it wherever you find your audio podcast. You can also watch it on the Sportsline YouTube page.
Welcome back to the show. You know, the NFC North was arguably the best division in football last year, sending 3 teams to the playoffs. The Lions are reigning division champs, are at the Packers week 1. The Ben Johnson era underway in Chicago as the Bears host the Vikings on Monday Night Football to start the year. We start this segment with the Pushing the Pile guys in Kyle Long and Mike Renner. Let's first start with talking about the team schedules and also team predictions for this particular division. And I want to start with the Lions, but I do want to make sure I get this right. And Kyle, I'm going to start with you because they have a Week 8 bye to the Lions. Before that, at Green Bay, Chicago at home, at Baltimore, Cleveland, at Cincinnati, at Kansas City, Tampa Bay. That's a pretty rough start to the season.
Yes.
What do you think?
It's the gauntlet, and there's a lot to prove there for the Detroit Lions, obviously, from day one with the new regime. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator changed up, injuries galore on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm sure Mike will talk about this, but there's a lot of work to be done in the training room, in the meeting room, on the practice field, gelling with these new brains, these new minds who are in charge of both sides of the football. I'm not concerned about the culture. Dan Campbell's done a fantastic job. Leadership, obviously, is strong there. The offensive line's still going to be a strong point for this team. But you got to have that mad scientist replaced on offense. So until they prove to me that they can find a way to do that or have some semblance of the genius they had offensively last year, I fully anticipate this being a dogfight in the NFC North the whole way through.
This is, I know I saw the strength of schedule there and it wasn't number 1, but this is one of the hardest schedules I've ever seen. Because the teams that weren't good last year on their schedule, teams like the Bengals, teams like the Giants who have added so much this offseason or should be a lot better this season, the fact that the NFC North plays the AFC North, we're just not going to see the 14-win teams the way we saw a year ago. It's just they're going to beat each other up too much. Those divisions are both too good, probably the 2 best divisions in football. So Detroit Lions losing both their coordinators, it's going to be difficult for them.
So how many wins for the Lions? Mike, you first. How many wins?
I went 10 wins.
10?
Okay.
I went 9 wins.
Woo! Okay.
All right. Let's keep it rolling with the Packers because a bit of an easier start for them. In their first 8 games, just 3 of those teams have made the playoffs last season. So, Mike, this is your team. This is your squad. So where are you at when you look at the schedule?
It's another, like I said, the AFC North, NFC North is going to make it difficult for a lot of these teams to maintain that success. I have them only getting to 9 wins. I went through game by game and picked all of these this morning. And it's just the fact that this Green Bay Packers team, they don't really have any dominant units at this point in time. You know, I think they're good across the board, but I think they're very susceptible across the board to anyone. They can beat anyone, but I think they can also lose to a lot of teams. So I think going 9-8.
The job Hafley did last year on the defensive side of the ball, the brilliance of Coach LaFleur on the offensive side of the ball, hopefully a continuation of Jordan Love's education as a quarterback will lead this team to what I think will be a 10-win season. And you know what, it's funny, you're the Packers fan, I'm the Bears fan. I gave them an extra win. You know, there's something wrong there. But I do like the quarterback in Green Bay. I do like that they added pieces at receiver. More weapons for this guy. It's an arms race in the NFC North. And I mean, whoever can score the most points. But you look at that schedule, the last run of games there for the Packers, they better hope they're healthy and ready to fight, because right there at the end, Bears, Broncos, Bears again, Ravens, Vikings, these are all really good football teams. And obviously it starts there with the Lions on Thanksgiving. A lot's going to happen in that last quarter of the season for these teams in the NFC North.
I didn't necessarily think I was going to see the Bears guy giving a slight edge to the Packers over Mike Renner. But hey, Mike, if we're looking at this latter half of the schedule post, Thanksgiving, if they can get hot, get on a heater, what are some wins that might be unexpected that you think that they could pick up?
Well, that's why I have them going 9-8, because one, you got the early bye, and then that stretch at the end where after the Giants game, there's no certainty. With any of those. They only won one divisional game last year. They lost all those divisional games. I do think, though, the one team that I said is susceptible, the Lions going to Detroit, they won that game a couple years ago. I think they could win that game this year.
Okay. Let's get to the Vikings. If you're a Skull Nation, pack your passport. You got Dublin and London in back-to-back weeks. It's the J.J. McCarthy era. You also have the Sam Darnold game coming up there, Week 13 at the Seahawks here. So, Mike, the question then becomes how much of the J.J. McCarthy portion of this factors into what you think Minnesota will do this year. How many wins for them?
Yeah, I have them getting 9 wins as well. I'm really kind of hedging my bets here. But I do think that it's difficult. It's going to be difficult for him to replicate what Sam Darnold did. Just because, Sam Darnold was awesome last year. It's hard to argue with the stats. Now, I do agree that offense is very quarterback friendly. You have an insane group of wide receivers there. The offensive line should be much better. But I do think that J.J. McCarthy, this is his first year at quarterback. Rarely do we see a quarterback just hit the ground running. Last time we saw it was probably Patrick Mahomes and maybe later season Jaden Daniels last year. So it's just going to be difficult to replicate that success. And again, for another team that has a dogfight of a schedule the entire way.
You know, and this is a team that has obviously a great scheme and great skill on the outside, and it lends itself to having anybody at the quarterback position have relative success because of how wise they are on the offensive side of the ball. And I've been in rooms where you have a guy that's not as bright at the offensive coordinator position, and it's tough sledding the entire year. But for J.J. McCarthy, coming off the injury in his second year, he was in the rooms there with Sam Darnold. He knows what it took to have success. I expect him to hit the ground running. I do not have them being as successful, though. I'm going to be going, well, actually, I guess I'm going to be going 7-10 for the Minnesota Vikings. It's a dogfight in the NFC North. And just like he was talking about the latter quarter for the Green Bay Packers this upcoming season, there's no gimmies for this Vikings team. And you could either win 2 or you could lose 2 in the division. And that swing changes it from, 10-7 to 7-10.
Defensively, Mike, how do you have the outlook for Minnesota coming into the year?
I mean, I still think they're going to be great on that side of the ball anytime you have Brian Flores, but I do see them taking a little bit of a step back because you lost a big piece of the secondary. No more Stephon Gilmore, no more Cam Bynum. Their cornerback room right now, it's the worst in the NFC North, maybe the worst in the NFC entirely right now. So that to me is worrisome when you talk about a division where everyone should be able to throw the football around.
Yeah, and there's all these receivers in the division. Packers added receivers. Yeah. The Bears added receivers. Bears got a really good tight end in the first round as well. You're going to have people that cover these folks. And just like I was talking about with the Lions, are you going to have people healthy enough to get after the quarterback early on in the season? Guys like Aiden Hutchinson and all around the NFC North. Those are the questions I have. Can you match up with the arms race at quarterback and the skill positions in the NFC North?
Kyle, you mentioned this mad scientist that we're talking about, the Lions, who is now in Chicago, and Ben Johnson. So let's get to the Bears. We don't have to wait long to see him facing his former squad Week 2, where we get the Bears and the Lions. We also, of course, have the Hail Mary, the Fail Mary game. I guess it depends on what side of it you're on when they face the Commanders in Week 6 on Monday Night Football. We always ask this about the Bears, Kyle. Is this a playoff team when you consider the pieces that they have, the draft, everything, the new coach? coach and the schedule that you're looking at in front of you?
Well, you know what? I really do think that this is a team that can play themselves into the playoffs. And as we saw last year with the Washington Commanders, it's not necessarily who you are on paper, but how much juice you got when the dance comes around. And we saw Jaden Daniels dance his butt off in the playoffs. Could we see Ben Johnson's offense be that much better than last year's iteration of the Chicago Bears offense? Is that enough to carry this group to the playoffs? On the defensive side of the ball, obviously I really like the secondary there in Chicago, but is the money they spent on these free agents, these pass rushers, going to come to fruition with sacks? That's what it's going to come down to. I love the Bears. I've got them going 10-7 on my piece of paper. And you know what? I also gave the Packers 10 wins. So, I'm not just a homer here.
You're being fair.
I like this Bears team a lot.
I'll just say I need to see it first with this Bears team. You think about last year's schedule. We talked about they had the easy first half, the difficult second half. Well, they won one game in that difficult second half. It was against the Green Bay Packers down the stretch there. So I'm going to need to see them beat the good teams first, because we just saw they have the second most difficult schedule in the NFL on paper. That means that every week is going to be a good team. So they're going to need to figure out a way to beat those and win those games first against those playoff and Super Bowl caliber teams. They didn't have it last year. I'm going to need to see it before I believe it. 8-9.
Okay. At Ravens, at Eagles. I mean, there's teams that are tough to play no matter the venue. And then when you go to the Link or when you go to M&T Bank Stadium, it just feels like the whole world's against you. So, God bless the Bears in that stretch there. But I think they've got some toughness, and I think they're looking to prove some things this year.
So just a quick follow-up. We can pull the schedule up once again. So say, Mike, we're playing hypotheticals.
Yeah.
So that's what we do here in the offseason. If they beat the Commanders in prime time and then go win at the Ravens, at the Bengals, by that point, how are you going to be feeling about the Bears if they prove that they can at least take on those sorts of teams?
Completely different. You win those games, all of a sudden, you're more of a 12-win team. Okay. I wouldn't even say like an 8-win team or a 10-win team where Kyle said. I think you're a 12-win team where you're going to places like Minnesota, you're going to places like Green Bay, and you're either favored or it's like a push in terms of the line. Like it's a toss-up. So that is going to get, I think, very early on with those first 2 weeks. Minnesota, Detroit, we're going to get a great handle on where the Chicago Bears stack up in this division.
We got James in the control room. Would you mind keeping the graphic up while I go through this? So the primetime games, the eyes of the football world are upon you. These are the games where the opinions are made. That's where the talk shows start to get their ammunition. So Monday Night Football, you start hot. Commanders, Monday Night Football, Week 6. Obviously, Jaden versus Caleb. A lot going to be publicized about that game. And then, you go and you play the league's elite at quarterback with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. It just keeps happening. So if you can find a way to maybe win 2 or 3 of these primetime games and get yourself ready for a fight on Black Friday in Philly, like you said, 12-win, 13-win team.
Yeah, it's just tough. I'm looking at that left half of the bracket trying to find 4 wins out of the first 8 to see if they can do it. If they can try to maybe pull it off, it'll be interesting to see. By the way, when we have odds to win the division, you have 1 10-win team, you have 2 10-win teams. So Mike is telling us it's a 1-bid league in the playoffs. Are we getting 2 NFC North teams into the postseason?
You never know. And like last year we saw with the NFC West, it's just like a big muddy mess until the end somebody emerges. I think it was Days of Thunder. He said just keep your foot in it, aim for the smoke.
Oh, nice reference.
You're going to come out of turn 3 into turn 4 in the lead. So just keep your head down, war of attrition, stay healthy. We saw how much health played into the success or lack of success in some of the teams in the NFC North last year.
Okay, here comes cold trickle down the sideline.
There we go.
Here's a look at the odds to win the NFC North. Lions are the betting favorite, plus 115. Pricing gets a little bit longer there with Vikings and Bears. Chicago 5-1.
Value.
Back here on HQ Spotlight. So we did the NFC North schedule breakdown. Now let's talk about the NFC South. So how many times have we said the division is wide open when we're talking about the NFC South? It feels like a lot. And it's been one of the weakest divisions in football as of late, with 3 of the 4 teams finishing with records under 500 4 times in the last 7 seasons, including last year, although it has belonged to the Bucs. Recently speaking, they're looking for their 5th straight division title. We're also most likely going to see a full season with Michael Penix Jr. under center there in Atlanta, a new quarterback in town. We don't know who exactly for the Saints. And we saw glimpses of Bryce Young kind of getting his stuff together towards the latter half of last season. So can the Panthers build upon that? A lot of questions. So we did the whole schedule breakdown with the NFC North. Now we're going to do it with the NFC South. We're talking about the Bucs first and foremost. They get 4 primetime games and a Week 9 bye, looking for their 5th straight straight division title. Kyle, I'll come to you first. When you look at the schedule for the Bucs, where are you at on them? Do you think they're going to succeed once again in this division?
You know, when you hear my record for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're going to kind of pause.
I had to do a double take. I'm not going to lie.
But I love this guy, Baker Mayfield. I love the way that this group has been able to adjust to multiple guys at the coordinator position. Leadership is unquestioned in that their quarterback, Baker Mayfield, can handle anything. Even if the sky is falling around him, he will compete. He will find a way to win games at home, in enemy territory. I love the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've got them at 12-5. And you know what? There's even a Bucs fan upstairs that said, "You are smoking crack right now." And I said, no. You just need to watch Baker Mayfield a little bit more.
I'll say this, they should have been 12-5 last year. They coughed up some ugly games. The Falcons won both of them last year, most notably. I think this team is far and away the class of the division. They are the most complete team. They have some dominant units. I look at this offense, and I don't see a lot more talented offenses around the NFL. With that offensive line, Emeka Egbuka, who they added in the draft, that trio of wide receivers now, and then Baker Mayfield running the show. And I love what they did also in the second and third rounds, adding 2 cornerbacks, probably the weakest part of that defense, and they just made it so that it's kind of foolproof now. One guy goes down, they have so many guys they can throw in there at corner. I went 13-4. I think they are not going to drop a single division game. I think they have a chokehold on this division, and I think they could be your 1 seed in the NFC.
Well, I'm glad he talked about the corners, because these Bucs fans, they were clamoring to get a cornerback, and they wanted one. Obviously, in the first round, they got Egbuka there at the top, but then you said it. They went and got 2 corners. That's the only thing that held them back from really making the big run last year was the secondary, being able to stop the pass. They addressed that. So you can talk about the coach leaving all you want, but they still got Baker Mayfield. They still got all their dudes. They're ready to play some football this year.
Yeah, speaking of the dudes, Jason Light done a good job last couple of years keeping the core guys intact, signing them to big deals, and then putting in pieces around them. Mike, you mentioned the Falcons and went down to the wire with Atlanta in Tampa Bay. They thought they were a quarterback away. That's why they got Kirk Cousins and drafted Michael Penix Jr. Now it's Penix Jr. there. What do we think about the Falcons? How many wins for them?
I think the offense is going to be much more consistent. I think Penix at least gives you the ability to pass down the field that Kirk Cousins obviously never did. But I still just look at this defense and I'm like, they're not that good. You're relying on 2 rookies, your 2 rookie first-rounders. That is what you're relying on to rush the passer. And more often than not, we've seen throughout the annals of NFL history, rookies just have a tough time adjusting to the NFL, especially in the trenches, especially when it comes to rushing the passer. So that's going to be the big thing to watch. Is if those guys hit the ground running, yeah, they can go above this, but I think a lot of teams are going to score a lot of points against this Falcons defense. And if that's the case, I just see them kind of being an average football team. I have them going 8-9 this year.
When Michael Penix Jr. stepped into the driver's seat for this offense in Atlanta, it became one of the more fun offenses to watch.
He looked good.
In prime time, when he went toe-to-toe with Jaden Daniels on the road and took the league by storm, that was really where I said, I love this guy. Actually, I liked him. I liked him in college. He dealt with injury. He was up against a lot of stuff physically in college, which leads me to my next point. Is he going to be healthy? Because he's going to be out there for the entirety of the season. What's their contingency plan if he goes down? Because if he goes down, we got a lot of question marks in Atlanta. And to your point, a lot of those rookies expected to make a big impact on the defensive side of the ball. I've got them finishing up at 7-10 in the NFC South.
Well, it's back to Kirk Cousins
Yeah.
if he goes down. And I don't think at this point,
Okay,
we saw last
let's
year,
ask the same question for Kirk Cousins then. What happens if Kirk Cousins goes?
No, I mean, that's
Bijan play
my
quarterback?
worry, and why I was worried when they gave up that first rounder, the future first rounder. It's like Michael Penix had one of the worst injury histories you'll ever see from a prospect. Missed multiple seasons, had multiple, different joints and ligament injuries. So I'd be a little worried about that if I'm the Falcons.
Throws a great ball.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Lefties just throw it back, it sounds like, right?
Let's talk about the Panthers. Not to bring the mood down or anything, but we saw glimpses of Bryce Young. Felt like he was starting to get things together towards the latter half of last season. They're returning to prime time in the schedule for the first time since 2023. Our producer, James, who is a Panthers fan, he has, concocted this stat, right? So week 1 against the Jags, the last 2 times that the Panthers opened the season against the Jaguars was 0-3-0-4 and 15-16, and those were Super Bowl runs. So if you're looking at this and the pieces that are in place, and Bryce Young and T-Mac that he's throwing the ball to, Kyle, is there another Super Bowl run in the Carolina Panthers' future for the upcoming season?
Get me some of what James is sipping, because I like it. I like where he's going with this. You know what? 0-3 was a long time ago. In 15, they had a guy by the name of Superman at quarterback, I believe. So, you know what? For Bryce Young, the guy on the screen right here, that's their quarterback, that's their leader, tremendous young man. I love everything that he's had to say and not had to say in his press conferences and on the field. The most important part, he has gotten better and better and better. I really like Coach Canales. I like the moves they made in the draft. I like addressing some of these defensive needs. That being said, 6-10, Carolina Panthers, which in my opinion will be a much better team than last year's team.
Yeah, I used to work at PFF. We used to do a lot of data analysis. We would call that a small sample size, having only 2 data points to support that Super Bowl run. And with this Carolina Panthers team,
Not putting on your PFF cap, Mike. Oh my goodness.
I think it's going to be a lot better. I think it's going to look a lot better, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But I look at this defense, and I still see massive holes throughout the roster. They were obviously so bad a year ago, and down the stretch it improved, but it only improved so much. I think Bryce Young gives you a floor, but that floor is still, I'm right in lockstep with Kyle, like a 6-win football.
Best part about that Jag stat is just opening up the season against Jacksonville. I don't even know if they won those games or not.
People will know by the end of this year that Bryce Young is the guy, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will no longer
Even
be,
Pete Prisco?
I was going to say,
it
is
will no
Pete going to
longer be a
believe you?
question. Hey, you know, Pete thinks running backs grow on trees, you know?
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the Saints. No primetime games, one of 3 teams that do not have that honor going into the season here. Derek Carr retires, new head coach. Mike, give me the sense of New Orleans here, because I feel like it's going to be tough for them to collect a lot of wins, even a handful of wins this season.
Yeah, I thought last year they were primed for a bottoming out of sorts. They didn't get to, the top 3 pick that it would have taken to really get that quarterback of the future. But I think this year they're in prime position to be that team who does bottom out to a pick 1, pick 2, pick 3. There's not a lot of teams that are really in that rebuild mode. I think the Saints are firmly one of them, even if they don't want to go completely tear it down and build it back up. But there's just relying on so many older players to still make an impact on this roster. They're so thin at a lot of positions. I love their past draft, but again, we're relying on rookies to make a big impact for this team. I do think new head coach Kellen Moore, I just don't know if he has the talent there to do exactly what he wants to do offensively, and especially when you would see they're like Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck. I have this as a 2-win football team.
Yeah, I have them as 2-win football team as well, and it's important to point out that the wins that Kellen Moore and his staff will be looking for are, did we get this roster move right? Do we get this draft pick right? Because, we're not going to go to the Super Bowl this year. We ain't winning the Super Bowl. Let's set ourselves up down the road. Let's build a culture. I like the guys in the offensive line room. Obviously, they've added to that group. They can shift some pieces around to get the best version of that offensive line. And whoever it is at the quarterback position can grow with Kellen Moore in that system, build that culture, and maybe they end up getting that number 1 pick next year. But 2-15 will probably guarantee you that.
Fellas, enjoyed it. Check out Pushing the Pile, the podcast from Kyle Long and Mike Renner. Let's wrap things up with the odds to win the division, which last year was basically a dead heat between Tampa Bay and Atlanta. But right now, as the guys have alluded to, looks like a clear favorite on the west coast of Florida. With Tampa Bay, your betting favorite plus 110.
Let's go back to football, because after an injury-riddled 2024 and a roster overhaul in the offseason, the San Francisco 49ers looking to make their way back to the top. And the schedule makers have thrown them a bone, gentlemen. Our CBS Sports crew crunched the numbers, and the Niners have a .425 strength of schedule. That is the easiest of all the teams in the NFL. They're facing just 4 playoff teams from a year ago. But be careful what you wish for, San Fran. History tells us that the easiest schedule does not always translate into playoff wins. As you take a look at the easiest ones going back to the 2000 season, Bears, Falcons, Pats all found themselves in similar spots, and those 3 teams did not make the postseason. But we know this is the 49ers, and when it comes to how the odds makers are looking at their schedule, they sit atop of the NFC West, projected to have 10.5 wins this season, also expected to win the division there. The Seahawks, who finished second last year, just missed the playoffs, down at the bottom. So let's continue to react to the recently released schedule, and to do so, we've got our NFL crew of Mike Renner, Kyle Long, and Lige Douzable. Guys, let's start our conversation with the San Francisco 49ers. Before we do, though, how do we feel about the schedule release videos this year?
Chargers
thumbs up or thumbs
Chargers
down?
Always a home run.
Yeah.
They did the Minecraft thing, and it was out of this world. They always throw little tidbits in here and take jabs at different teams. So the Chargers always do a marvelous job of the schedule release.
Yeah, I think the video production teams deserve, they've been paid a lot. Whoever the creatives are, though, some of the ideas
Really
were
funny.
out there.
Crazy.
Yeah, I think they should set a time limit on all of them.
Yeah, some of them are a little lengthy.
You know, I got 2 young guys. I don't have time.
Yeah, the Jags, I think, took a minute to get to the
Just
point.
give me a list, man.
All right.
Just give me a list.
All right. Well, the 49ers did an Oregon Trail themed schedule release, which I really liked. That was a fun game growing up. But in all reality, they kind of, for as much trouble as they went through last year, gentlemen, they are certainly rewarded with the easiest schedule going into the season. And I thought this was interesting. In 6 of the past 8 years, at least one team playing one of the 2 easiest schedules has gone on to make the playoffs. So this year, that is the 49ers and the Saints. Lige, we saw that. They sit at just over 10.5. How are you feeling about the 49ers?
And that's the only reason why I think they will go to the playoffs, because their schedule seems so easy. I think there is a lot of turnover when you look at the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of the guys that were kind of key components of them having success are no longer in the building. And when you look at it, Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator, is back. But their defensive line, they're revamping it, right? 3 draft picks went into that defensive line more specifically. But I question, guys, do those draft picks fit the scheme that Robert Saleh wants to run? Now, they have been abysmal against the run last few years. And you can tell by the guys they drafted, they want to stop the run. That was an emphasis. A point of emphasis was to stop the run. Also, health has been an issue for them going back last year. You see some of the guys that they lost: Deebo Samuel, Aaron Banks, Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd. But you go back to the offensive line, right? Trent Williams was banged up. That was some personal things outside the field. He missed the majority of the game. Jalen Moore, who was their spot starter, he leaves and goes to Kansas City. This is the same issue they had last year, was depth on that offensive line. So say Trent Williams gets hurt or another frontline starter gets hurt, they're in the same position they were in last year, where Brock Purdy was running for his life. And then there's a guy behind us, Christian McCaffrey, one of the best backs in football. Who says he comes back and is the guy that he was? So a lot of question marks. To your point, Haley, the schedule makers did them a lot of favors this year.
And even if Christian McCaffrey does come back healthy, we got to see a really good job of splitting up the volume. You know, you can't just give him the football all the time. I understand when you got that shiny car in your garage, you want to drive it all the time. But you've had it for a few years now. That thing's been up and down the block a million times. And to your point about Brock Purdy and protection, if you don't have Christian McCaffrey out there, the safety valve for this offense, and you don't have that elite level protection, you're looking at a tough road. Luckily for them, the schedule makers have done them some favors.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit of a paper tiger, because I think they're going to be a 10-win team or even more. They could win 12, 13, but this is not a Super Bowl contender right now. They are far too thin at far too many positions. You just look at those names that left. Yeah, they weren't big impact players last year because they got hurt, but that's also why they didn't make the playoffs last year. That's why they were drafted 11th overall. So not having those guys come back, they're not going to get back to that Super Bowl form, but they could still be a double-digit win team.
Yeah, they're always a threat no matter what. You've always got to keep your eye on them. If we go just below them, we'll find the Rams. Win total there sitting at 9.5, so a little bit less than what we're seeing with the 49ers. Good news and bad news for the Rams. And I thought this was interesting, too. They have a chance, and I think you'll appreciate this, Kyle. They have a chance to be the first team in NFL history to beat all 5 of the teams with a mascot that is a bird. They play all the bird teams this year, so they do get the opportunity to do that. But on the bad side of this, Kyle, 4 games kicking off at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's very, very difficult anywhere you go.
Ludicrous. And I'm a guy who played on the West Coast in college, and we used to have to wait all day. We'd watch the East Coast games. We'd watch the Ohio State kickoff. Then I'd maybe put my tape on, and we'd play at 4 or 5 o'clock Pacific time, whatever it is, or I guess it would be 3 o'clock for the prime time window on the East Coast. That's an early start. But also, when I think about this Rams team, obviously I love Matt Stafford, love Sean McVay. You bring Devontae Adams in. You continue to bolster that defensive front. Not huge guys on the defensive line, but winners. Guys who can really get after people. My concern is Devontae Adams and his ability to fit into what Sean McVay is trying to do offensively. They are going to ask Devontae Adams to do a ton outside of just going and catching the football. If you watch Puka Nacua, you watch Cooper Kupp, historically in that Rams offense, they are asked to do a lot of blocking. They are over the middle of the field. They're going to be getting beat up. And Puka Nacua, you hope that he's healthy because it gives Devontae Adams one-on-ones. And for Puka, you hope Devontae Adams is healthy. So you get one-on-ones. What are they going to ask Devontae to do? Is Sean McVay going to wiggle a little bit with Devontae Adams and allow him some more freedom?
What I'm actually worried about their offensive line, because we saw it got so decimated last year, like kind of ruined a good portion of their season from like weeks 2 to weeks 10. They didn't add to it. In fact, they lost guys from it. So if they get any injuries this year, if they strike again and they have some elder statesmen in that offensive line room, it could get ugly again, and they just don't have the depth to replace it. And I also worry about their secondary. So as much as I think they're going to put up points, I think this team is very thin when it comes to being able to absorb injuries. And when you have a 17-game season, that's kind of what it's all about. So I have them as a 9-win team.
Yeah, and that's my biggest concern, Mike, the secondary. Like, they really didn't add to it. You talked about the offensive line, but this team is going to be run by his offense. We know Sean McVay's an offensive-minded coach. They want to be physical. They want to run the ball. You talked about it. They lost Jonah Jackson. They didn't really get to see him that much, even though they paid him in free agency because he was banged up all last year. I think getting Alaric Jackson was big because he was going to be sought as one of the most, best left tackles in football, and they were able to re-sign him back. But getting that continuity up front with Steve Avila, also Bo Limmer, can these guys get on the same page to run the ball effectively with Kyrie Williams? You talked about Devontae Adams. How long does it take for him and Matt Stafford to get on the same page? Because Cooper Kupp, it seemed like it was day one, him and Matt Stafford were on the same page. So I have them winning 10 games this year and still being a playoff team.
10, that's where I'm at too, Lejay.
10 wins. All right, well, of course, it all starts week 1 on CBS, where we'll see the Rams take on the Texans. A tough follow for Houston there after Beyonce had her concert at SoFi last week. But obviously, this is about the football. When we look at the early specs, gentlemen, the Rams are slightly favored there at 2.5. The point total is set at 46.5. Lejay, when we look at that matchup, what jumps out to you and how do you think it goes?
These are two teams that went to the playoffs last year. Both teams went to the division. And if not for some bad protection, the Rams maybe upset the Philadelphia Eagles and go to the NFC Championship game. The Houston Texans is about C.J. Stroud and that offensive line, right? Everybody saw how good he was his rookie year. Came back, I don't want to say had a sophomore slump, because when you're a young quarterback and you're not getting protected, you're going to get skittish. Even if you're a veteran quarterback and you're getting hit in the teeth, you're going to get skittish. So can they get that offensive line right? They traded away Laramie Tunsil. Shaq Mason is no longer there. They're going with some younger guys now. So can they gel and protect C.J. Stroud? So to me, it comes down to C.J. Stroud and the offensive line. And then for the Rams, they're secondary, because that's an explosive Houston Texans offense.
Yeah, and you talked about the offensive line and the pieces missing there. I'll say this, without all the weapons on the outside, it makes it exponentially worse when you don't have protection. So guys like Nico Collins need to be on the football field.
Correct.
The other receivers in that room need to be there to help C.J. Stroud out.
Yeah, new offensive coordinator coming over from the Rams. I'm excited to see how that plays out, because I just know that the Slowick Stroud did not mesh.
It's always interesting that first week. It's kind of like everyone's chance to re-familiarize themselves with who's coaching, who's playing on the rosters, all the things. All right, let's go to the Cardinals. Another really great schedule release. I loved it. It was the Mac Wilson freestyle of the schedule there. So if you haven't watched that, go check that one out. But for the Cardinals, they get 2 national games. That includes a Monday Night Football showdown against my Cowboys. And then they also get Thursday Night Football at home against the Seahawks. Mike, I'll come to you on this one. When it comes to the Cardinals, give us your season outlook for them.
Yeah, the Cardinals are one team I just don't know how to pin down right now, because they have so many new faces. This defensive line's been completely overhauled, and I just don't know what it's going to look like with Jonathan Gann scheming it up, because last year they had to scheme up pressure anytime they got it, basically. They didn't have guys who could win one-on-one. This year should be different, right? You have so many guys you added, whether it's Josh Sweat in free agency, Walter Nolan in the first round, Calais Campbell back in the Cardinals uniform. Like, it should be much, much different. But the back end, we don't know how they're still very, very young. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I do just think they're in the wrong division to really say that they can put their stamp on it. Just everyone, there's no gimmies in the NFC West. So every single division game is going to be a struggle for them. I had them when I picked every single game. I ended up with 8 wins, but I could see this very easily being a playoff team.
I think that their schedule lends itself to obviously starting hot, and Kyler Murray's going to, find his groove early and often. And I think their Week 8 bye is a really good spot for a bye to be. Oftentimes, as players, we find out when the bye is and we get pissed. This is too late, or this is too early. We don't need it then. That's a great spot for the bye. You make a run, maybe try to stretch together 7 wins to start the season, something like that, some tough wins. Then you're in a great spot. You're in the driver's seat. I like Kyler Murray. There were times where he played like an MVP this past season. We need to see that again. Marvin Harrison Jr., take the next step. Take the next step, and that offense will be potent.
I have the Cardinals winning this division at 12-5. And Mike, I hear it's hard. You say it's hard to pin them down. One thing I know for sure by watching tape, this team plays extremely hard. And I talked to their head coach at the owners' meetings about that, Jonathan Gannon. And I said, Coach, how hard was it to get everybody on the same page to play with that effort? And he was like, dudes, it wasn't hard. Actually, it was hard. But when everybody believes in a plan, that's how you build a culture. And they have the right culture. You talked about it, Mike. They revamped the defensive line. That was the biggest issue on this team. Like, those guys played hard, but they didn't have the talent. Now with Walter Nolan, now with Josh Sweat. Let's not forget, Darius Robinson missed a good portion of the season last year, but he played really well in the back end. You get a guy like Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson. Like, they have the hogs up front to get after the quarterback. And I know there's issues or concerns with their young secondary, but to me, Garrett Williams was one of the best nickel backs in all of football last year. And getting Will Johnson, if healthy, in the second round may be the steal of the draft. It comes down to Kyler Murray, because this team was leading this division for a good portion of the year last year, but then you go to that Minnesota game, the Carolina game. He didn't play well. He has to play well in those big spots. I got this team winning the division.
By the way, they were 6-3 at home last year, the Cardinals were, so we'll see if that carries over as well. They opened the season against New Orleans on CBS in that week 1. So, Lige, you're saying the Cardinals are going to win the division. I imagine, since you have the Seahawks going 5-12, that they are at the bottom of the division in terms of your conversation. Kind of similar to how you were talking about with the Cardinals. It feels very question marky when it comes to the Seahawks. Their quarterback room looks different. A couple of their weapons look different. Why the 5-12?
I think that's the biggest issue, Haley. Their offense, what is it going to be? Clint Kubiak comes over. Yes, he's worked with Sam Darnold, but let's not forget, Sam Darnold wasn't the starting quarterback. He was working with Brock Purdy on a day-to-day basis. So you talk about the players that they've added, they lost. They lose DK Metcalf. They lose Geno Smith, right? They lose Tyler Lockett. These are great locker room guys, but also productive guys as well. Let's not forget, the Seahawks went 10-7, and they essentially revamped this offense after 1 year, which I don't know why, right? And then when you look at it, this team's going to be led by its defense. They're probably going to have a top 5 defense. When you look at the depth chart, there's not really a weakness on their defense, but there's major concerns when you look at this offense, not only with the interior of the offensive line. Yes, they got Grey Zabel, but he's going to be a rookie. He's going to be tasked to either start at guard or center from day one and be the guy. But they've also had issues with their offensive tackle staying healthy. Now you have new pass catchers. You have a new quarterback. You have a new coordinator. So it's going to take a lot of mesh and gelling. I think they're going to struggle this year. I got them going 5-12.
Yeah, I was scratching my head from the minute they let Geno Smith go out the door. I mean, we love watching Geno Smith. Great quarterback. There's only a handful of guys that can really sling it like Geno Smith can. Tremendous in the 2-minute part of the game. And when you're on a football team like this, or in the NFL in general, you got to win those one-score games. Geno Smith does a good job in the 2-minute drill. I had questions about that the entire time. Sam Darnold, I wouldn't even call that a lateral move, okay? I would call that a downgrade for the Seattle Seahawks.
For sure.
From Minnesota to Seattle.
Well, no, losing Geno
for the Seattle Seahawks. It's not even a lateral move, you know? Like, you're kind of settling there for what you got. DK Metcalf out the building as well. A lot of questions there. Yeah, for the Seattle Seahawks, I got them finishing up at 7-10. I'm just not crazy. I mean, like you can't pin down the Cardinals. I can't figure out what the hell was going on, except for the Grey Zabel pick I love.
Oh, that was an amazing pick.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are buying the Seahawks. They had one of my least favorite off seasons, and it's just this offense I don't think is built to score points right now. And I think Clint Kubiak's a good offensive coordinator. I think that might be an upgrade. But the talent-wise, losing DK Metcalf is huge. He opened up so much for Jackson Smith and Jigba. That speed threat, just that ability to take the top off of defense.
Which is what Kubiak wants to do to people.
Yeah.
And now they don't have it.
Exactly.
They signed Cooper Kupp, who might
get out there,
man. They have no speed out there.
Legitimately, 2, 4, 6 wide receivers are your 1-2 punch. I don't see it working out. That's almost never worked out in the modern NFL.
They went from rabbit mode on the lawnmower to turtle mode.
And that's my question, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp have a similar skill set. So how is Clint Kubiak going to use their skill set? Because they both do most of their damage in the slot. So to your point, I think they need a speed element outside. Not only did they lose DK, who's a fast receiver, but also a big receiver that can go up in the red zone and get those jump balls for you.
And they will face DK Metcalf in week 2 when they travel to Pittsburgh. So we'll see how they're feeling at that point. Guys, thanks so much. But stick around. We got more football.
The 2025 NFL schedule features 272 games across 18 weeks. The AFC East schedule has a relatively easy strength of schedule, ranking these teams and these slates as some of the easier in the league. Now, based on the opponent's 2024 win percentage, the Bills are tied for 23rd on strength of schedule. Dolphins tied for 21st. The Ravens have it a little bit tougher at 9. The Patriots, they are sitting pretty going into this season. Looking at an easy slate at 30th. Let's continue our reactions from Wednesday's schedule release. We're going to tackle the AFC East with our Bryant McFadden and our Tyler Sullivan. Hello, fellas. We're going to start with Buffalo. 6 of the Bills' first 7 opponents missed last season's playoffs, and 4 of their final 5 foes did the same. So, B-Mac, of the teams widely expected to challenge the Chiefs for the AFC supremacy, the Bills, it seems like their strength of schedule is putting them in a pretty good spot. Walk us through it.
Yeah, no question. Of course, that first ball game, week 1, I consider to be the week of unknowns because you're seeing a new team for the very first time. Even if they retain some of their coordinators from a year ago, it's a brand new team. But they're facing off against the Baltimore Ravens. You get the Baltimore Ravens at home. That's a major plus. Remember, in the regular season matchup a year ago, they had to travel down to Baltimore in a primetime matchup, and that was a daunting test for them that they eventually failed. But I love them in that spot. I like them to win that ball game. You look at the Jets, of course, taking care of their business. Me personally, Tyler, Jenny, when I look at the Buffalo Bills schedule in totality, I see 13 wins for sure, potential 4 losses. And the 4 losses that I have when you look at their schedule is Kansas City, Houston, Philadelphia, and New England. 2 road games being lost and 2 home games being lost. But in all, I can easily see the Buffalo Bills winning at the bare minimum 13 games.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, B-Mac. I think 13 wins is dead on for the Buffalo Bills. And the thing that stands out to me with this schedule is there's really not a lot of windows for them to have potential losing streaks. You talk about there's a lot of heavy hitters on this schedule. You talked about it right out of the gate, the Baltimore Ravens. I think that they actually lose that game at home. I think Baltimore comes in with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder in that game. But outside of that, you see, you know, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're sandwiched in around. I think it's the Carolina Panthers and the Miami Dolphins. You have the Philadelphia Eagles late in the season. They're sandwiched around opponents that aren't particularly that scary to the Buffalo Bills. So there's a lot of cushion in between these heavyweights, and I think that's only going to help them kind of pad those stats to get to 13 wins and still be a force, be a threat to be the #1 seed in the AFC. I think they did a lot of good things this offseason, adding Maxwell Harrison in the secondary, Joey Bosa at pass rush. This was a defense that struggled last season, particularly on 3rd down. They were the 3rd worst in terms of their opponents being able to convert on 3rd down in the NFL. We've seen Josh Allen be Herculean. What was really being the hamstring to this team last year was their inability to get off the field. I think they fixed that. I think they finished 1st in the AFC East. And when that 13 wins, they rival for the 1 seed.
Yeah, of the 8 teams playing a first-team schedule in 2025, the Bills have it the easiest, and that is notable because first-place teams have done well in that situation since the NFL switched to that 17-game schedule back in 2021. Speaking of the Bills, we're going to talk about the Dolphins next. The Dolphins get the Bills in Buffalo early in the season when the weather is still good, so that's a plus. They have a tough middle stretch, though. They host the Ravens on a short week. Then they have the Bills again before a trip to Spain, facing off against the Commanders. All 3 of those opponents finished in the top 5 in scoring last season. So, B-Mac, what's your overall take on the Fins schedule?
You talked about that difficult stretch in the middle of the season. I think this is going to be a difficult year for the Miami Dolphins. And the reason why I say that, just look at the personnel side of things. It's safe to say this current group of Miami Dolphins, they're not the same in terms of talent as what we watched last year with them, especially when being healthy. So I think this is a lesser talented team and a very, very difficult schedule. I see them, the Miami Dolphins guys, best case scenario for me, I'm sorry, Dolphin fans, but 8-9. I think that's a realistic record for the Miami Dolphins. When you look at some of the teams they will face off against, you look at Buffalo, of course. I think Buffalo is the cream of the crop, not just in their division, but in the entire AFC. I love Baltimore. I think New England would be a much improved team compared to what we saw last year. And then you look at other teams. You look at Atlanta. You look at Tampa. This is a very, very intriguing schedule for the Miami Dolphins. And like I said, I don't think this is more of a talented team than what we saw last year in 2024. So I see the Miami Dolphins, Tyler, 8-9 is the record for me. I think that is a realistic number when you look at the entire roster and, of course, the schedule.
Well, BMAC, if they're not going to like your 8-9, they're not going to like my 6-11, because I don't think this Miami Dolphins team is going to be particularly good. I think it's a tough schedule. It's easy out of the gate. I think you might kind of get some fool's gold out of the chute here, where you have the Indianapolis Colts, you have the New England Patriots at home. That's typically been a house of horrors for New England, going down to Miami early in the season. But then, as you referenced, Jenny, later on in this season, it does turn into a gauntlet. You go to Atlanta, then you face Baltimore, Buffalo, Washington, all at home, but that's right before your bye. I don't think you're going to be favored in any one of those games. And then the tail end of the season, you face the Bengals, the Buccaneers. Then you go up to Foxborough to play the Patriots. We know the narratives of the Dolphins going and playing in cold weather cities. That could be a tough spot for them. So I have them going at 6-11, and this is kind of where we're going to have to look at them in the mirror. They're going to have to look at themselves in the mirror this season to say, okay, what are we? We have a high-flying offense. We have Tyreek Hill. We have Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Tua Tagovailoa. But have we reached the ceiling at this point with this current core? Defensively, I have my questions. We don't know what's going to happen with Jalen Ramsey. Is he going to be traded? If so, that's only going to hurt your secondary as you're going up against a lot of these elite quarterbacks in the AFC. So right now, I have the Miami Dolphins at 6-11, which could rival last place in the AFC East. Right now, that's plus 230.
You mentioned how they fare on the road, especially in cold weather. Over the past 3 seasons, the Dolphins have the 4th best home record in the league, 18-7. Everyone loves coming down here to Miami and playing some football. You mentioned the Patriots as well. So if you're looking for a surprise playoff contender, one team to definitely watch, which excites me, is the New England Patriots. The Pats have the easiest strength of schedule in the AFC. And before we dive in, just a quick note here. The teams with the easiest schedule in the AFC have finished with a winning record of 7 straight seasons. That is a positive for the Patriots fans out there. Tyler, Mike Vrabel in his first year as New England's head coach, what can we expect?
Yeah, and I'll do you one better in terms of fun little knick-knack stats here for the New England Patriots. Last year, they were favored in absolutely 0 games. They were not favored in a single game. This year, they're favored in 11 games as it's currently standing, and that is quite the night and day, and that's really a testament to the overhaul that this team put together. You mentioned Mike Vrabel, now the head coach, really gives them a high floor, in my opinion. And then, of course, they go into free agency, big spenders, Milton Williams, Robert Spillane, Stephon Diggs. You go down the list, they're going to be a lot better offensively, and we already know that they had pieces defensively, Christian Gonzalez to name one in the secondary. They're only going to be better there. I think this is an 11-6 team, and a lot of it has to do with, yes, Drake May coming into year 2, Mike Vrabel, the roster's better, but also this schedule is really easy. I'm looking at week 6 on. I mean, at New Orleans, at Tennessee, the Browns, the Falcons at home. That, to me, right there is 4 wins that you can inflate this record. And even at the tail end of the year, you go to New York, you face the Dolphins at home, like I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of pockets here where you can start piling up wins. So I think that this Patriots team is a double-digit win team and could be rivaling for a wild card spot.
Yo, Tyler, I'm right there with you. I had the Patriots winning 11 games. To everything that you added, I'm right there with you. But what about this element in terms of the personnel, which is 10 times better than what we saw a year ago? They had the 2nd best coach in the division. Mike Vrabel, right behind Sean McDermott. I believe when you look at his entire coaching resume, he's the 2nd best coach in the AFC East. That means a lot because we've seen Mike Vrabel do more with less throughout his time there in Tennessee. It's safe to say this might be one of the more talented rosters he's ever coached as a head coach. When you look at what they did via free agency and when you look at the additions they made through the draft. And to your point, this is a great opportunity for 2nd-year quarterback in Drake May and how they start their season. You're at home against the Raiders. The Raiders, of course, that's a changing of the guard as well when you look at coaching and personnel, but that's a winnable game. The same can be said for week 2 against the Miami Dolphins. And you talked about some of the other games, Carolina, Cleveland. I mean, they have some winnable matchups, and they're going into some of those matchups with the more talented team. That should actually help their efforts in being able to win those ball games. And that's why I have them winning double-digit games. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Patriots be one of those teams that we saw miss the playoffs last year, but make the playoffs this year.
And B-Mac, you talked about Mike Vrabel and him being the second best head coach in the division. You're already kind of seeing that right now. I mentioned it being a high floor for the Patriots because of his presence. You had their big free agent signing, Milton Williams, sign a massive deal in free agency. He's going to be one of the faces to the defense. He already told reporters this offseason that he's been called out by Mike Vrabel because he maybe not showing maximum effort right out of the gate. And that's really set the tone, as he put it, to this whole offseason program that I think they're going to carry that momentum going into OTAs, going into mandatory minicamp, and of course training camp. So you're already kind of seeing the impact of Mike Vrabel on this Patriots roster.
Since we're all into fun facts here, New England is just one of 3 teams, along with Baltimore and Tennessee, scheduled for 3 straight road games. We're going to cap that one off right there. Talk about the Jets next. There's so many changes around the Jets this offseason. We got a new coach, a new GM, a new quarterback, a new punter. Had to throw that in as well. The league spent the past 2 seasons really jamming the Jets in our faces, much in part to Aaron Rodgers, and we all saw how that worked out. So this season, very different. They only have 2 primetime games, a game in London, and then the rest is 1 p.m. on Sunday. So BMAC, Aaron Glenn has said that he wants to move in silence. The schedule makers kind of gave him an opportunity to do so, right?
Yeah, in terms of primetime games, you better believe it. They're moving in silence, and I think that's a great way to have your season get going as a rookie head coach. But the issue for me, guys, when you look at the Jets and how they started the season, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Tampa, Miami, Dallas, Denver, right? Best case scenario, you may see 2 winnable games for the Jets. That's a difficult way to start the schedule. So me personally, when you look at this regime under Aaron Glenn, Tyler, I do believe we will see competitive football because he is that type of coach. But I see best case scenario 8 wins, 9 losses for the Jets. And a lot of that has to do with getting off to a potential rocky start. When you look at Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Tampa, those were 3 playoff teams from a year ago. And then you factor in some of the additions the Dallas Cowboys made, not to mention how good the Denver Broncos were in year 1 with Bo Nix. Who knows what that stretch of ball games could look like in the first 6 games for Aaron Glenn. And if they get off to a rocky start, they're going to be battle tested the rest of the way. So I see them winning 8 games and losing 9.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is going to be a tough season for New York, and it's really just because it feels like this is just a team in transition, first and foremost. Again, new head coach, new quarterback in Justin Fields. We'll see what he's able to bring. Of course, going from Chicago to Pittsburgh, inconsistency as a passer, of course, flashed as a rusher. We'll see what he can do. Maybe he's the latest, late quarterback bloomer in the NFL, and he makes us all look bad. But right now, I think this is a 6-11 football team, and I'm saying that where I'm giving them a win in week 1 because right now it's Mason Rudolph as the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, not Aaron Rodgers. If that changes, that's probably a loss. And I also gave them a win in week 18 against the Buffalo Bills because I'm assuming they're going to rest those starters. So I'm kind of hollow 6 wins here. It's really maybe a 4-win team here for New York. And as you said, B-Mac, it's really tough to begin this season. You're talking about Buffalo, the Buccaneers, the Dolphins in Miami, the Broncos. Go down the list. They're probably not going to be favored in any of those games. So right now, it's interesting to see this young roster. Again, I like a lot of these pieces. That's what's interesting. I like Garrett Wilson. I like Sauce Gardner. I like Will McDonald. I like Breece Hall. I like even Justin Fields to a degree, especially at the price that they got him. But I don't know how it's all going to come together. And right now, with a first-year head coach and unknown at quarterback, it's tough to really say that this is going to be like New England, for example, an 11-win team, a double-digit win team, despite that talent. Right now, I have him at 6-11.
So you mentioned that tough stretch to start, and then you look at they do face 5 consecutive squads that miss the postseason in weeks 13 through 17. So there's ebbs and flows to the schedule for all these teams. Bryant McFadden, Tyler Sullivan breaking down the AFC East schedules. Of course, we'll have all the action all season long right here on CBS Sports HQ. And at CBS, we love the AFC. That's no secret. So make sure to keep it locked on CBS and HQ for all the news, highlights, scores, and more.
Welcome back to HQ Spotlight here on CBS Sports Network. The AFC North is always a race to the finish line. Just within the division, it's a gauntlet of a schedule. A year ago, it was the Ravens winning it all, a 12-5 season ending at the hands of Buffalo. That's who they opened the season with in 2025, by the way. Meanwhile, the Steelers still sorting through their quarterback conundrum. They'll face their former one in New Jersey as Justin Fields commands the Jets offense. The Bengals have to get out to a hot start, right? They're trying to avoid another playoff miss and a chance to start 2-0 for the first time since 2018. More on that in a minute. And how could we forget Cleveland with quarterback controversy of their own? So much to talk about when it comes to the AFC North. So let's do it with our good friends, our two-time Super Bowl champion in Bryant B-Mac McFadden, and our Super Bowl covering NFL reporter in Tyler Sullivan. Guys, certainly appreciate the time. Let's start our conversation, though, with the Ravens. We're just going to kind of bypass the regular season kind of here because it seems like no matter what with the Ravens, they always find their way to the postseason regardless of the schedule, but it's the playoffs, B-Mac, where things get a little bit interesting. So when you look at the 2025 schedule as a whole here for the Ravens, they get the bye week in week 7. They kind of get a little bit of a break there as they face teams that finished under 500 there after the bye, but it gets kind of tough there the first week of the season, B-Mac, or the first start to the season, I'll say. So how do you see the Ravens faring to get the season started?
Once again, another successful year for the Ravens. I have them winning 12 ball games, but it's safe to say the hardest stretch for the Ravens is within the first 4 ball games. Traveling to Buffalo, Haley, Tyler, and then traveling to Kansas City. In both cases, I have the Ravens losing both of those ball games. Week 1 is like the week of unknowns. You're playing against a very, very highly talented team with a high-level quarterback on the road in Buffalo. I see that as a loss. Bouncing back on track against Cleveland, Detroit, and then traveling to Arrowhead Stadium, I see that as a loss as well. But when you look at the middle part of their schedule, when you look at games against Houston, Rams, Chicago, Miami, Minnesota, Cleveland, the Jets, Cincinnati, and in that first game against Pittsburgh, I see the Baltimore Ravens taking care of their business against those said teams. And then when you factor in what we usually see happen with this AFC rivalry with the Pittsburgh Steelers, regardless who the quarterback is with the Pittsburgh Steelers, they always find a way to split against the Baltimore Ravens. And that second game for Pittsburgh and Baltimore, that's the final week of the season. And if everything goes accordingly, Tyler, it's safe to say Baltimore may rest a lot of their key contributors for that ball game, which will make it an easier path for the Pittsburgh Steelers to win that ball game, to get that split that I mentioned earlier. And the same can be said for Cincinnati. So once again, another successful year. 12-5 is what they had a year ago, win-loss record. I see them doing the same thing for this upcoming season as well.
Yeah, it's a good point, B-Mac. If you look at that Week 18 game against Pittsburgh, they could easily rest starters. I actually have them winning that game, but if you lose that game, then I'm right there with you in terms of the prediction. I have them actually at 13-4. I think this is going to be one of the best teams in the AFC yet again. You still have Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. You add DeAndre Hopkins to that offense, and we saw defensively last season, they turned a corner. They were abysmal to start the year, bottom of the league in most meaningful categories. You look at the second half of the year, they were number 1 in the NFL. So the answer of who the Ravens are defensively is probably somewhere in the middle in terms of where they were in 2024, how they ended it, and how they're going to be in 2025. The thing that I look at, and you referenced it, B-Mac, so tough out of the gate, going to Buffalo for Sunday Night Football. I actually think they're going to win this football game, though. I think they're going to go into that hostile environment and pull out the win in the upset, because you got to remember how last year ended. All the drops from Mark Andrews, the playoff struggles continuing for Lamar Jackson. They nearly were able to edge it out, but just some mental mistakes prevented them from advancing into the playoffs. I think they're going to carry a massive chip on their shoulder into that game to have a statement win that I actually think will come back around when we're talking about number 1 seeds and potential tiebreakers later on in the year. It could be a very important Week 1 win for Baltimore.
We'll have to see it play out. That is certainly an exciting matchup, though. You got the 2 MVP finalists last year in Lamar and Josh Allen going head-to-head, so we'll see that on Sunday Night Football. Guys, I know I'm not the only one in saying that I am begging the Bengals to start the season strong. It has just been so tough to watch over the last couple of seasons. Thankfully, the schedule makers trying to throw them a bone this season. They get the Browns and the Jags, sorry, Jacqueline, to start their regular season off strong. But
yeah, we played the Bengals tough.
Yeah. Okay.
I was
right.
just making that
we
up.
Gotta stay. We gotta stay on time here. So we'll keep the Jags commentary to a minimum. But Tyler,
a whole other segment. I'm sorry.
When
It's coming.
you look at the Bengals, a brutal stretch on Thanksgiving. It's going to be a true test there for Joe Burrow. It's still no good news as well. We got to talk about Trey Hendrickson. Give us a temperature check here on how you're feeling about the Bengals going into 2025.
Yeah, it's really funny because I've kind of been bashing the Cincinnati Bengals throughout the offseason for what they weren't unable to do on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, the Trey Hendrickson situation is still ongoing. But then I'm going through the schedule and I'm like, win. And all of a sudden I look up and they're 12-5. I'm like, how did they get here? The Cincinnati Bengals. And you referenced it early on in the season. If they do not take care of business against the Browns in Cleveland and the Jaguars, and also I'll throw the Vikings in there with a young J.J. McCarthy getting his feet wet in the NFL in week 3. If you don't take care of business out of the gate, then we are firmly putting this entire season on notice for Joe Burrow, for the head coaching staff and Zach Taylor, all of it. They should be able to start off hot. And overall, I love their offense. If they are what we saw at the end of last season, where they were going on this dramatic run to try to get into the postseason, Joe Burrow on his own and Jamar Chase are going to win a lot of football games. Now, the question is, and it's very similar to what we were talking about with Baltimore, can they actually replicate all of these wins into the playoffs? I have my questions about that because of that defense. I think they'll win shootouts when it gets to the nitty-gritty of the playoffs. If you don't have Trey Hendrickson, if you're really relying on Shamar Stewart, who had 4.5 sacks during his entire collegiate career, I have my doubts.
And for me, that's why I'm going in more of a lesser direction with Cincinnati than you, Tyler. I see them winning 9 games. Now, you guys talked about the schedule makers threw them a bone this year to start their schedule off. Well, heck, they threw them a bone a year ago. Remember, week 1, they played against Jacoby Brissett and the New England Patriots at home, and they lost. But we talked about how bad they've been to start the season off. I really believe they were overemphasized getting off to a better start. So I see them coming out the gate 3-0. But then you look at some inspired defensive, offensive teams with balance. Detroit, Denver, Green Bay, and of course their rivals in the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have them losing those ball games. And I think they get back on track in that stretch against New York, Chicago. Usually split a series with Pittsburgh, but I have them getting swept this year with Pittsburgh. And then, of course, finishing off with Baltimore, and then finishing off on a good note when you look at games against Arizona and Cleveland. But I have them winning 9 games this season, and it's a lot to do with Cincinnati doing Cincinnati-like things, losing the teams they shouldn't lose to, and how much improved will their defense be, especially if you're having a disgruntled Trey Hendrickson, or even worse, Trey Hendrickson not even in a uniform for Cincinnati.
Yeah, the things with Trey Hendrickson certainly escalating in a direction you don't want it to go. Last time we heard, he said things are getting a little personal, and they have not come to an agreement there. So certainly something to keep our eye on. Also, a random fact that I don't know how much this really matters, but the Cincinnati Bengals will travel the fewest miles this season. I only mentioned that because the Commanders did that a year ago, and they made it all the way to the NFC East title. I am not saying that matters, but just a fun fact to keep on your mind as the Bengals get their season underway. Let's talk about your Steelers, though, B-Mac, because as we know, they have never had a losing record under your head coach in Mike Tomlin. However, that quarterback question continues to loom, and it just seems like the longer the offseason goes with those question marks, it's kind of feeling a little bit, I'm not sure when it comes to Pittsburgh. They also will face 3 of the 8 teams that made it to the divisional round of the playoffs last year. B-Mac, are you nervous at all about this season, or are you trusting that your head coach will figure it out regardless?
Well, I'm trusting in terms of regular season success. That's never been an issue for Mike Tomlin, regardless who's been at quarterback. And I kind of went through their schedule, Tyler, under the assumption that they may have Aaron Rodgers and they might not have Aaron Rodgers, because that's the reality of the situation. But I have Pittsburgh going 9-8, another winning season for Mike Tomlin. You look at how they start the season. I really love those 2 games. You travel to MetLife to play against the Jets, rookie head coach in Aaron Glenn, and then you get Seattle at home with Sam Darnold under the helm for them at the quarterback position. So I love those matchups to start the season with or without Aaron Rodgers. And then, of course, you have Cleveland, Minnesota, Cincinnati, Green Bay, very, very intriguing game. Indianapolis, they should be able to take care of their business. And then it gets really, really dicey when we look at the final stretch. You have Chicago, Buffalo, Baltimore, Miami, Detroit, and then Baltimore again. I mean, that's a very, very difficult stretch to end the season. And we also saw a similar like schedule with them in 2024 and how they ended the season as well. And they didn't handle that gauntlet as best as possible. So I think we see some of the same like errors on the football field for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but in all, I see them winning 9 games, losing 8.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers by far are the toughest team to gauge when we do this exercise, right? Because we don't know the most important position. We don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to come out of the darkness and say, you know what, I'm going to the Steel City. I'm going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, or he's going to say, you know what, I'm going to stay in the darkness for a little bit longer. I'm calling it a career, which makes it really difficult to kind of figure out what they're going to be. For me, I'm treating it like they're not having Aaron Rodgers because right now they don't. Right now it's Mason Rudolph as their quarterback projected to be the starter in week 1. And to me, that results in the first under 500 season for Mike Tomlin, which is crazy to think about. But I think this is a 6-11 football team with Mason Rudolph as their quarterback. Now, if it's Aaron Rodgers, it's a different story. But I even look at week 1, B-Mac, and I say, you know what? If there's a revenge narrative, I think the schedule makers are trying to make it Aaron Rodgers versus the New York Jets. It could be Justin Fields against the Pittsburgh Steelers and him coming into that game with a little extra motivation to try to beat up on his former team that benched him over Russell Wilson. So I look at that and go, oh boy, this could be tough sledding if you're losing a game out of the gate to the New York Jets in New York. And as you referenced, B-Mac, at the end of the season, look at that in week 10. You're starting on Sunday Night Football in Los Angeles against the Chargers. Then it's the Bengals. Going to Chicago against a much better Bears team with Ben Johnson as head coach. You face the Bills, the Ravens, even the Dolphins on prime time, and then the Lions in Detroit. That's real dicey. You're talking about a possibility there of 1, maybe 2 wins. So again, this is really tricky here for Mike Tomlin because he's always been that guy to have a high floor. Right now, I don't know if that floor is really high.
Yeah, remember, too, the Steelers will play the first game in Ireland as well. They'll take on the Vikings overseas in week 4, so a good gut check there when it comes to just dealing with the schedule as it comes. Let's wrap up our conversation talking about the Browns because just there's so many storylines that we can hit at this point. And it's kind of sad that Shedeur Sanders was the one that stole all the headlines because they have so many other problems to address. But you guys are both on the same page here. There's not going to be a lot of winning in Cleveland, B-Mac, when it comes to the Browns this season and their schedule.
Yeah, it's going to be a Brown-like year for Cleveland. I think they're getting ready for 2026. You know, this is kind of like a rebuild, to say the least. They stockpile on draft picks as they look towards the future. And this season will clarify their mindset moving forward outside of 2025. Tyler, I see 3 wins, best case scenario. You look at their schedule.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, right where you see 3 wins, I don't know, but best case scenario, I see 3. Tennessee definitely is 1 win for sure. It should be. But trying to pencil in another 2 more wins is hard. Maybe Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy at home there in Cleveland. That could maybe work out. And there's always a game for Cleveland. They win a game they're not supposed to win. They're playing against a better team, and they find a way to squander out a victory. That's probably going to be their 3rd win for them this season. So it's going to be a long, long year for Cleveland Browns fans. But I think they kind of understand that as they look towards the future.
Exactly. This team traded down and, you know, they are planning for the future. I think they're going to have more quarterbacks than they do wins. I think right there, 3-14. When you have Shedeur Sanders, we all thought, okay, if they drafted him anywhere between day 1 and day 2, you could say, okay, maybe the arrow's pointing up. But where they drafted him in the 5th round, they don't view him as a starting quarterback. He can prove them wrong, but right now that's not who they see. They see him as more of a developmental piece. So is it Joe Flacco? Is it Kenny Pickett? Is it Dylan Gabriel, who they drafted ahead of Shedeur? So right now, I look at this team. They might be good defensively, but other than that, I see 3 wins.
More quarterbacks than wins is certainly a statement, Tyler, but you are not wrong, my friend. So good to see you guys. Stick around because we got another segment with you on the other side. Before we get there, take a look at the odds to win the AFC North. No surprise, based on what our experts just told us, it is the Ravens sitting there at -140 to repeat as champions. The Bengals, though, sitting in potentially second there at +220. And the Browns, a long shot, +2,090, 900.
Back here on HQ Spotlight. So we did the AFC North. Now we're going to do the AFC South schedule breakdown. It's been a pretty winnable division over the past few seasons, maybe with the exception of the Texans. They're trying to win it once again. Got a new head coach, some new weapons for Trevor Lawrence in Duval County. The Colts, we know it's a little bit of a QB battle there. Definitely not a QB battle in Tennessee because it's a new era when it comes to their quarterback. Cam Ward, the #1 overall pick under center, will try to flip that franchise around. And we have Brian McFadden and Tyler Sullivan here with us to break down the AFC South, and we are starting with the Houston Texans. Most of the roster, gentlemen, it's probably one of the most complete in football, aside from maybe up front, some holes, some problems there. They opened the season on the road with a major test in the Rams. So, B-Mac, kick us off. How many wins are we seeing here? What's the schedule prediction when it comes to C.J. Stroud in Houston?
Another double-digit win season for DeMeco Ryans. He's done a phenomenal job since becoming the head coach down there in the Lone Star State. You talked about that intriguing matchup. Like I said, week 1 is the week of unknowns. In the National Football League, you're traveling out to visit the Rams, a playoff caliber team. I see that as a loss. But the thing about that stretch of games after week 1, you go into a three-game homestand against the likes of Tampa, Jacksonville, and Tennessee. So that's an opportunity to get right, especially being there in your backyard. So I see them getting off to a nice winning streak in those 3 ball games. Losing to Baltimore is something about Baltimore and the Houston Texans where they don't have an answer for Lamar Jackson. I see that as a loss. But in all, when you look at the entire schedule, guys, it's not a difficult gauntlet, especially when you look at the divisional foes within their division, the AFC South. I see them as the cream of the crop in that division. So I'll go 11-6 for their overall win-loss record.
Yeah, we're right in the same spot. I'm 10-7. I think they win this division. My question is Houston, is the narrative going to be they're a good team, but they're not a great team? They can beat up on bad competition, but they struggle against the elite. I think that's kind of going to be the theme here, and that's where I have them when I'm going through this record. I think they lose to a team like the Rams. I think they lose to a team like the Ravens, both on the road. I think they lose to Buffalo, and then I think they beat up on their division opponents. So I think they're going to be somewhere in the middle here. It's going to help get them to double-digit wins, but overall, I'll have my questions going into the playoffs if they can really hang with some of the elite in the conference.
Okay, so it's a consensus double-digit win season for the Texans. Now let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They play 4 of their first 6 games at home in Duval, including a Monday Night Football matchup against the Chiefs. Welcome to Jacksonville, Taylor Swift. They have a new head coach in Liam Cohen. We got Travis Hunter and BTJ. But still, Tyler, you are not a believer in the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tell us why.
I know. I said it before we went on. I go, you're not going to like me this segment because, I have them at 6-11. I don't know if they're going to be a good football team in terms of putting up wins. I think they're going to be fun. I think they're going to be high flying. I think that when we put Liam Cohen in as head coach, I think he's going to put the best out in Trevor Lawrence in terms of production. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter, I think all of that's going to be fun. I still have my questions about the defensive side of the ball. They were able to acquire Jordan Lewis to help the secondary. I don't know necessarily how they're going to use Travis Hunter. I think that's one of the big questions. Is he going to minor on offense and major on defense, or vice versa? And I think that's going to be kind of a key scenario here, because if you're telling me he's a Heisman-winning cornerback in the NFL, well, that helps you tremendously for a defense that struggled to get off the field last year. But overall, you look at the start of this season for the Jacksonville Jaguars, it is a bit of a gauntlet. I think they win out of the gate, but then at the Bengals, the Texans, the 49ers, the Chiefs, the Seahawks, which I think they win, but then the Rams before they hit the bye. Those are a lot of losses right out of the chute there. I think they wrap up the season nicely, but overall, that start really puts them behind the 8 ball.
But Tyler, you said 6-11. Jacqueline, I do one better than Tyler. I go 7-10. This is a figure-it-out type year for Jacksonville, like figuring what this entire new team is going to look like, trying to figure out, will we see a consistent stride from their star quarterback in Trevor Lawrence? And most importantly, can Trevor Lawrence stay healthy? But if you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, I think it's safe to say you don't have championship-like aspirations right now. You just want to see a competitive nature, a competitive culture being built. And being able to build upon that, year after year. To be able to get to that level where you actually have legit playoff championship aspirations, and this is the first step in trying to do so. Clearly, winning more games than a year ago is a must, and I have them doing that, winning 7 games and losing 10.
You know what, B-Mac? Usually I would agree with you, but it's May 16th, so I am in that delusion. Like
the bar low is what B-Mac said.
No, I'm like, I do have championship aspirations because I'm delusional right now because it's May. But, you know, hey, after the home opener against the Panthers, maybe reality will start to set in, you know? Let's go to the Colts because we've heard that Daniel Jones and AR, they're going to be splitting those first-team reps. It's Shane Steichen entering year 3. The Colts, hey, if you're a Colts fan, maybe grab that passport. You're going to Berlin for the NFL's first game in that city. So, B-Mac, is this a playoff team? What are your thoughts? It kind of feels like no, but when you're looking at the schedule, where are you at on Indy?
Well, number one, no. As I see it today, they're not a playoff caliber team. Secondly, who will be the starting quarterback? Not only being the starting quarterback week 1, Tyler, but who will be the starting quarterback throughout the year? Will that starting quarterback week 1, will he have the flexibility to have room for error, or will he have a short leash? We don't know. But one thing we do know, this is a roster that they have talent in different areas of their team, and I think that's good enough regardless of who the quarterback is, Tyler, to win at least 7 ball games. Best case scenario for me, I have the Colts going 7-10. Jacqueline, I will re-answer your question again. No, they're not a playoff caliber team. They're ways away from being that, but I think they can be more of a competitive team, and that starts and it stops with whoever the quarterback will be for their offense.
Yeah, I agree with you, B-Mac, that they're not a playoff team, and I disagree because I think it's a 5-12 football team because I have so many questions about the quarterback room. I like what they did this offseason in adding Tyler Warren for a tight end position that was desperately lacking a pass catcher last year. They helped the secondary with Travarius Ward and Cam Bynum to really bolster that weakness on their roster. But I still don't know what it's going to look like under center. Like, there's a quarterback competition where there's a scenario where Daniel Jones wins. Is a Colts fan supposed to be excited about that outcome if Daniel Jones takes the preseason by storm and wins the starting job? No, you want it to be Anthony Richardson. But right now, Anthony Richardson last season completed 48% of his passes. So we don't really know what kind of production, what kind of efficiency they're going to get under center. And you look at this schedule after the bye week, it's at Kansas City, the Texans, the Jaguars, the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Jaguars again, and then at Texans to round off the year. The tough opponents in the AFC, division rivals. That's really going to be tough. Maybe they split with Jacksonville, but outside of that, I don't see a lot of wins to end the season here for Indianapolis.
All right, finally, let's go to the Tennessee Titans, where it is Cam Ward's time to shine here. They have a tough test. Week 1, traveling to Denver to face the Broncos. Tyler, what is the prediction here for Tennessee?
It's 4-13. This team is going to be picking very high in the NFL draft next spring. They're in a transition year with Cam Ward as their quarterback. The big thing for me is, do they have enough around him? And quickly, the answer is no. They spent $82 million on Dan Moore to be his blindside tackle. Last year, Dan Moore let up 12 sacks. Looking at PFF, that ranked 140th out of 140. That is not the way that you protect your #1 overall pick, your asset of the future. So I have a lot of questions about the team around Cam Ward, and the schedule is going to be tough there as well. So again, I think this team's going to be picking high in the draft next year.
You talked about the schedule. They start against Denver, the Rams, Indy, Houston, Arizona, and then they have a middle stretch of New England, Indy, Chargers, Houston, Seattle. Yeah, they're going to be picking in the top 5 again for sure. I have them going 5-12, best case scenario. Best case scenario, 5-12. But more realistically speaking, I think they're right around that area that you talked about, Tyler. It's going to be a long year for Tennessee, but I think they kind of expect that as well.
Yeah, and the win total on FanDuel sitting right there at 5.5. B-Mac, Tyler, we certainly appreciated that full schedule breakdown for the AFC South. Looking at the odds to win the division, the Texans, they are the favorites. The Jags at +270. I kind of like that value. I'm not hating it.
Underdog mentality. That's
exactly.
it.
A little chip on her shoulder.
Just sneak
Colts
in there and take the whole thing.
Yeah, they're 3-1, and the Titans, of course, the long shot at 8-1.
Let's welcome in John Breach and Emery Hunt here. So let's start with the Chiefs. They had a 15-2 record last season. I will say all the teams in the AFC West, they're between like tied for 11th and 16th hardest, so it's kind of all right there. Most primetime games, I will say, out of anyone with 7. John Breach, what is your prediction for them?
My prediction is Patrick Mahomes is still on this team. Travis Kelce is still on this team. Andy Reid is still the coach of this team. So I am going to go way over. I just feel like when you bet the Chiefs under, you're just going to spend the whole entire season sweating it away and then losing your money. It's not worth the anxiety. When I look at their schedule, Amanda, you mentioned some of those big games there with the Eagles, the Ravens, the Commanders. Well, those 3 games all have something in common. They're all in Kansas City. So when you look at their toughest games, and I'll even throw the Detroit Lions in there, those 4 games are all at home. So obviously you have that huge road game in Buffalo, but when you have the majority of your tough games at home where you went 8-0 last season, I would say that's a huge advantage. And then you look at this division. Look, we talk every year. Is this the year that someone's finally going to knock off the Chiefs in the AFC West? Well, I'll believe it when I see it. The Chiefs are 20-4 against their divisional opponents over the past 6 seasons. That's about 5-1. So if they go 5-1 again, they don't have to win many games to get over that 11.5. So I'm going to take the over.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking over as well. I got them winning 12 games this season. And when you think about Kansas City, I feel like the best time to catch Kansas City is in the early part of the season. I look at those first 4 games as where they can probably get off to a slow start. And then we'll hear all the stories of, oh, has Andy Reid lost the locker room? Has the message gotten stale? Has team figured out, Patrick Mahomes? Has Travis Kelce decided he's going to go and be a part of an entourage somewhere with Taylor Swift? And then they go into Kansas City mode and start ripping off a bunch of W's across the board. The 2 biggest games I'm looking forward for them on the road, and that's going to be at Buffalo and at the Cowboys in Week 13. Those are 2 potential losses in my opinion. But overall, Kansas City still has Patrick Mahomes, and Brees talked about it. Andy Reid, the same cast of characters. The run game should be better. Their defense should be better. And I think this team, at the end of the day, will be fighting for another Lombardi.
And they also worked on that offensive line, which they are always working on. Let's go to the Chargers here. Second year for Jim Harbaugh. They went 11-6 last season. We actually had Jim Harbaugh on a couple weeks ago. He was very excited about his personal life. He got a hip replacement and something done around the heart. So good shape for coach. What are the Chargers? What kind of shape are they going to be in? Because Vegas projecting them a little bit lower, John Breach.
Hey, well, Jim Harbaugh's a maniac on the sideline, so now that he's fully healthy, what are we going to see this year? I mean, he's going to be absolutely nuts. He is a motivator. He is someone who wins games. We saw what this team did in 2023 in Brandon Staley's final season. They won 5 games. They didn't do anything. You throw Jim Harbaugh in there, they completely flip things around and instantly were a playoff team. The one thing about the Chargers that's very interesting is you look at those first 3 games. You have the Chiefs in Brazil. You have the Raiders on Monday night. You have the Broncos at home. This is the first time the Chargers have opened the season with 3 straight divisional games since 1988. You can almost make or break your season in the first 3 weeks. If they were to lose those 3 games out of the gate, you're way behind the 8 ball in the AFC West at this point. So that is going to be huge if they start out fast. But Jim Harbaugh doesn't know anything but fast. That's the only speed he operates. So I don't think the Chargers are going to be concerned about that. I have them winning 10 games, hitting the over just slightly, maybe not quite hitting as being as good as they were last year. But I do think this will be a playoff team again, but maybe not catching the Chiefs to win the AFC West.
I have them winning 9 games. What I love about the Chargers this year and how they're built and how they're being built, as we know we're still in the midst of the offseason, they're going to be predicated on run game and defense. They load up in the backfield. Their defense should be better within the front 7. I like what they're going to be able to do up front along the line of scrimmage. On the offensive side of football, the O-line looks to be outstanding. That's why I feel like they're going to get off to a fantastic start. We may even see them beat the Chiefs in that opener. And then what happens, in my opinion, is when you get into a track meet and have to go score for score, bag for bag, do you have the quarterback that can do so? And that's where I get to after the bye week. When you look at going up against Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, again, Dak Prescott, C.J. Stroud, to me, those are games that could be a potential problem for the Los Angeles Chargers. One, because I don't trust Justin Herbert to go against those guys in a score-for-score basis, and also that's the tougher part of the schedule, in my opinion. So they can get off to a great start. Things looking great. They may even be in the league for the AFC West. And then after that bye week, things could go south for the Chargers. So if they can overcome that part, and by building up such a great lead in the beginning parts of their season, I think they have a chance to really go to the playoffs once again and maybe even challenge for that AFC West crown.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, Emery, it's actually nice to talk about the AFC West and saying there is some competition in this division for the Kansas City Chiefs. One of those teams, I mean, I think you got to put them in the mix, is the Broncos. They were so much fun to watch last season. They shocked us all. They went 10-7. I think Vegas is putting their win total at like 9.5 right now. There is a stretch. They go Chargers, Bengals, Eagles, weeks 3 through 5, so that's early. They don't have to face the Chiefs till week 11. Emery, what is your prediction for the Broncos?
It's almost good cop, bad cop, right? The good side says, well, they've added some depth in the backfield. R.G. Harvey is going to be a phenomenal rookie, may go over 1,000 yards. So now they have the running game. They're going to have the 1-2 punch with him and Jaleel McLaughlin. We know defensively, they're going to be outstanding. That defense is excellent across the board at all 3 levels. The question is whether or not Bo Nix can continue to build on what he did toward the back end of his rookie season. Because in the early parts of the year, he was a little bit of a liability. They're trying to coach around him. He missed some deep throws. But then halfway through the season, he started connecting those deep throws. Then the confidence started to gain. Then he started to win some games, become an asset. And you hope that he doesn't have that quote-unquote sophomore slump, and he's able to continue to build. And hopefully with the run game that they're going to add this year, a more dependable run game to go along with the expected growth of Bo Nix. With that defense, it should win some more games or be in more games on the front end. But I feel like this is just a tough division this season. They'll revert back to the mean a little bit. Maybe they overachieved a little bit last season. We'll see them hover on that 7 to 8 win mark in 2025.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way as Emery here, but I will say Sean Payton has now had a couple years to mold this team to exactly what he wanted. The Russell Wilson year wasn't what he wanted. He took a big risk by dumping everyone, kind of rebuilding the team, and that risk absolutely paid off last season with a playoff berth. So now you look at 2025, the big question is, Emery is kind of alluding to, is Bo Nix, where what's going to happen to him in his sophomore season? We have seen rookies come out and have a huge year in their first year and then struggle a little bit in their second year. That happened to C.J. Stroud in Houston. And if Bo Nix takes a step back, the Broncos are going to have a hard time competing in that division because it is so tough. But if Bo Nix can play at the level he played at last season, or even take a step forward, they brought in Evan Ingram, so he's got another weapon in that offense. As Emery mentioned, they brought in R.J. Harvey through the draft, so the offense should be better. Amanda, you mentioned that tough slate week 3, 4, 5, but weeks 1 and week 2, they do get the Titans and the Colts, 2 very winnable games. You get Cam Ward possibly making his first start. You could have Daniel Jones at quarterback, who's still learning that offense in Indianapolis, so it'll be imperative that they get off to a hot start. I have them going about 9-8, so a little bit better than Emery, and hovering right around that over-under number.
Okay, finally, let's go to the Raiders here. And I will say, look, for Bo Nix, like, I talked to that guy's quarterback coach. He goes, this guy just has what it takes to be a quarterback in the NFL, and he can't always teach that. Let's go to the Raiders finally. Dismal. 4-13 last season. I feel like anything has to be better than that. This is a new look team. You got Pete Carroll. You got Tom Brady in the front office. Geno Smith, a quarterback. They drafted Ashton Jeanty. You guys are kind of on different sides with this, both better. But Emery, you still have the Raiders with a losing season.
For me, it's all about consistency, Amanda and Breach. When you think about the Raiders and what can they build this year in year 1 of Pete Carroll, I think we'll see them get off to a great start. They can start 2-0, and then we're all talking about Geno Smith, all talking about Pete Carroll and the fountain of youth and showing clips of him throwing the football and running around at practice, and then hit some adversity hits with 3 straight losses, right? And so, to me, it's about can they find that level of consistency, because they do have a bunch of good pieces. They have a guy in Geno Smith. They have a guy in Ashton Jeanty. They have a guy in Brock Bowers. Defensively, they have Max Crosby and company. So they have some pieces and some things that you like about them, and you know Pete Carroll will improve, raise the floor of this football team, so they definitely will improve. I just think by 3 games more so than going to the postseason, but I feel like this team will be one of those pesky bunches all throughout the year that will be in every game. And then in 2026, we'll see them break through and become that playoff participant in the AFC, because this is a tough conference, let alone division in the West.
Yeah, definitely tough division, tough conference. Emery, though, you mentioned consistency. That is why I actually like the Raiders to go 9-8, because there's no one more consistent than Pete Carroll. You look at his 14 seasons in Seattle, he won at least 9 games in 11 of those 14 seasons. He totally flipped that team around. When he got there, they weren't great. they became a Super Bowl contender within a couple of seasons, obviously winning a Super Bowl in 2013. So I think that's obviously going to be the plan of attack. And when you look at their schedule at the beginning of the season, they open with the Patriots. They've got the Bears, they've got the Colts, they've got the Titans, all those teams in the first 6 weeks. So they have a lot of winnable games. Pete Carroll's a very smart coach. And let's not forget about Geno Smith. You got a new quarterback who's very familiar with Pete Carroll, knows what he tries to do, and know what his system is. And the other thing I love about the Raiders is that they get to play 7 of their final 8 games indoors. Geno Smith has a QB rating of over 100 in his career when he is playing indoors. So I think this team could pull off. They have a tough schedule down the stretch, but again, the games are indoors. So I think the Raiders could surprise some people, and I have them going 9-8, hitting that over.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this Raiders team coming up this season. Guys, have a great week, and thank you so much for joining us here. Emery Hunt, John Breach, taking a look once again at the AFC West predictions. You know what I was thinking, though, as they were going through this, Tommy?
What's that?
The coaches in this division. Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, Pete Carroll. I mean, these are legendary coaches we have all in one division. It is
quality.
So much fun.
And they all have their quarterbacks now, especially Vegas with Geno.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.